My inspiration comes from the world around us, just the stories everyone has, stories you witness every day, just to take that and find a way to share it with others. For my winning piece, I interviewed a man named Jim Dunham. He is a Old West historian, actor, fast draw artist, painter, just all-around interesting guy. I mean, I'm really glad I picked this piece because it turned out to be a really great subject to work on.
That's because the bad guy had also read the script and knew he'd been hired to give up very quickly.
People constantly say, if you had lived back then, do you think you'd have been a gunfighter? And I answer that by saying there's not a doubt in my mind that I would have been Tombstone, Arizona's expert in Elizabethan sword fighting techniques. What I believe is that my personality is such that if cowboys and Indians had not existed, I'm the kind of a person who would have found something to love, something to study. My whole life has been a study of the cowboys in the West. Literally, my life is dominated by cowboys and Indians. I'm the director of special projects for the Booth Western Art Museum and their historian. What brought me to Georgia was my wife went and got a master's degree in business finance, and she went out here on an interview. She said two things. She said, it's very pretty. There's beautiful lakes, there's trees, there's rolling hills. I said, what's number two? She said, they want to give me a lot of money. I said, we're moving to Georgia. I thought that I was going to make my living as a commercial artist, and so my major at the University of Colorado was an art major. And when they built this museum that was art that deals with the American West, it was kind of a perfect fit. And they interviewed me and they said, we need somebody who knows cowboys, knows Indians, and knows art. I said, I'd love to do it. So for about 8 years now, I have been the historian for the museum. First love of cowboys in the West was radio. People say, what do you look at? And you kind of just stare at the dial. But your mind builds pictures. And as a teenager, it drove me to the library, and I started to read about what these guys were like. Was fascinated with how interesting they were as people. In 1955, 2 television shows started. One of them was called The Life and Legend of Wyatt Earp, and 9 days later was the television show Gunsmoke. Those shows started a craze in the 1950s where people would go out and buy cowboy-type guns, real guns, and holsters. And then they formed clubs, and they would then have competitions where they would shoot and try to be the fastest gun in the world. I had convinced my dad that I wouldn't get in trouble, and he bought me a real Colt 45 as a present for Christmas. By the time that I finished high school, I was pretty good with a gun. I was starting to build a reputation on the national level of being one of the faster guns in the world. While I was at the University of Colorado, I started to perform in the theater. And I had a show about the gunfighters of the Old West, about the Western movies, and how the Western movies kind of get it wrong.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 37 people fall down.
I went to Los Angeles with that little show, had an interview with a producer at 20th Century Fox, and he hired me to perform in the studio tours. We'd bring the tourists onto the Western Street. About 4 or 5 stuntmen and myself would put on a show so they could have a live experience. And while I was under contract, they said, you can teach some of these movie stars how to handle guns, and I got a chance to teach quite a few different movie actors. People will come up and they'll say, did you teach John Wayne how to handle a gun? John Wayne was making Westerns in 1939. I said, how old do you think I am? What I'd like to do in the next few years is to do some more writing. I'd like to write a few books as I move into my retirement years. That's the future for me. What I'm hoping with the Western for film, if they would simply just concentrate on writing good history and writing well-made scripts, I think the Western could have a place in the future in film. Never going to be what it was in the 50s and 60s. Film has changed. But I'd love to see some small biographical stories of what these guys were like. Because I still want to go to the movie Westerns. I still want to go.